y'all, what's up? It's your girl, Beck. It's day whatever it says up there of the PCOS series, and I'm going to jump right into it because we got a lot to go over. Today's video is research based, so it's going to be deep and there's going to be a lot of stuff in here. So if you don't have time to stay and watch, just save it and come back, babes. I'm going to say this. I'm a newbie. I'm still researching. However, this one piece of the rabbit hole of PCOS I found to be very interesting, and that's what I'm sharing today. This is not the whole story. This is not the cause. This is just an interesting piece that I found. All of this information is online. You can look it up. You can do your own research, but I wanted to share this because it's not so much talked about online, so I would like to shed some light on it. So let's get into it and strap in because it's about to get crazy. Pause, read, do whatever you need to do. Okay, let's go. This is the first article that we are going to look at, okay? You can read this part if you'd like to read this part. That's completely up to you. Pause and read. We, the people, are going to keep going. I want to first start with this part here. You can pause and read it, but really the main portion of this part that I find to be important is that it's discussing how a lot of countries started using pesticides, these particular types of pesticides, without necessarily thinking about how it would affect the population. But this is where we're going to really jump in, okay? This portion here is simply talking about how some of these pesticides could have physical, respiratory, or nervous system effects, obviously. For example, cancer, hormone disruption, asthma, allergies, and hypersensitivities. Let's move on. In this portion of the article, it's discussing how some of these EDCs can antagonize, activate, and alter the expression of hormone receptors. It's also discussing how some of these pesticides can induce outcomes such as diabetes, obesity, cognitive dysfunction, and reproductive system impairment in both sexes. And it also discusses that low and high doses can trigger significant but qualitative differences biologically, depending on who you are. You know what I'm saying? Let's move on. This portion of the article, which is relatively close to the top, I believe, is talking about how the increased use in pesticides was essentially causing a toxic, vicious, it calls it, cycle of having to use more pesticides because the pests become resistant to the pesticides over time. So, of course, upping the ante. And it also discussed that they were considering how this could affect humans. And I want to talk about how some of the scientists had already been ringing the alarm about some of these things by not hypothetically, but actually watching in real time as this was happening to other animals and insects in the area and how animals were going extinct because they could no longer reproduce. Let's move on. This is important and you're going to see why, but it's talking about how just 16 complaints were filed in the civil court by the Justice Department on behalf of the Environmental Protection Agency, down 76% from Biden, 81% from Trump's first year, and 87% from the first year of former President Barack Obama, the year of 2009. Let's move forward. This also I found interesting because it discusses how during this administration, the EPA enforcement actions have dropped sharply and that it's essentially caused fewer legal enforcement cases against polluters. This is a good place for us to start. This is the actual and adjusted general fertility rates in the United States from 1990 to 2023. No surprise, it has gone down. Everyone's been talking about that. Let's move on. Now, while that graph is in the downward projection, I want to show you this graph of the agricultural consumption of pesticides worldwide from 1990 to 2022 in million metric tons. You can go ahead and look at that, pause that if you want to. We're going to move on. This article is kind of exploring the connection between polycystic ovary syndrome and pesticides. And there's a chart that I want you to see from this article we're going to look at. This is one piece of the chart, but on this side, they're listing the different types of pesticides and things. And then on this side, they're talking about the commercial application, which means what they're in. And on this side, they're talking about the correlation to PCOS. This is one, You can pause it, and I'm going to show you the other part. This is the other part. Go ahead and pause that. In the meantime, we're going to move on. I want you to take a look at this. Rising male infertility is largely driven by combinations of lifestyle choices, obesity, smoking, etc., environmental exposure to toxins, endocrine disruptors, pesticides, and increasing age and blah, blah, blah. The rest. I'm not going to read that part because I don't want this to be censored, but it's got a word on there that I don't know if I can say. Let's move on. I thought this whole article was very interesting, so you can pause and read that. But this part here I found very interesting about how some of these pesticides, right, the value had increased by 13% in the US dollar. I thought that was interesting, but we're going to move on. You pause that. Now this one is a bit frustrating for me, and I'm sure for most, but it's talking about how fertility treatments, the prices, specifically in vitro, IVF, fertilization, how the prices have skyrocketed since 2009, and that the prices have surged by 84% over the last decade. That's almost 100%. It talks down here about how the prices were $696.85 and have jumped to $1,279.20 by 2024. But of course, supply and demand. More infertility, more demand, more money. Okay, let's continue. Now, this one I thought was interesting. This is the number of agricultural-related enforcement cases, 1999-2000. Okay, let's look at the next screenshot, shall we? We're looking at 2009, 2010, 2011, and on the 2009 one, you can scroll. You can keep scrolling, but this is the amount of enforcement cases by then. Now, this last part is just anecdotal and sad. This is the amount of downloads in the English language of one of those articles that we talked about the insecticides and pesticides and whatnot. Okay, you see that number? Seems large, right? In the grand scheme, though, with the American U.S. population being this, it only equals this much of the population of people who are trying to be informed about all of said things. I think the saddest part about reading all of this information, to me, was kind of wrapping my head around the fact that even when you think you're doing everything right and you think you're eating clean and doing things, a lot of women tend to hit this hurdle where they're like, I'm doing everything by the books to fight this, and I can't seem to figure out why it's not improving. Honestly, this is a big reason why if you look on my YouTube, my Instagram, my TikTok, I talk about growing your own food. I talk about baking your own bread, and I talk about doing things for yourself, self-sustainably, because the reality is, can we trust in the things that we're being given? We don't know. In conclusion, right, if you're going to take anything away from this video, I would just take away just being more cognizant of what we're consuming, how we're consuming it, where we're consuming it from. It's kind of a big task because we can't track down exactly where everything is coming from. But I think by doing the best that we can, we are giving ourselves a better fighting chance. Anyway, y'all, until next time, bye-bye.